going to start my timer. So I got 3 areas that I want to talk about in ministerial ethics, talking about relating to other ministers, so I've got 3 different areas, and so I'm trying to kind of watch my clock, got it counting down, but I'm going to try to take maybe about 10 minutes on each subject in each area and move forward. Let me just start with reading some scripture today. Just going to give you some scripture that'll form the basis, the foundation for everything that I'm going to talk about. I want to say that, first of all, that integrity is not what you do, it's what you are, it's who you are. And so when we talk about ethics, it's not just a list of these are the things that you need to do. It really begins with an attitude. This is who integrity is about who I am. And so I say that because I want to read these scriptures, and these scriptures are what I want to suggest, at least them, and maybe some others, but these scriptures ought to form a basis for how we feel about other ministers. We'll talk about relating with other ministers, our minister-to-minister relationships. First of all, Matthew 7:12. Therefore, all things whatsoever you would that men should do to you, do you even so to them. For this is the law and the prophets. The golden rule, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Matthew 20, verses 25 through 27. But Jesus called them unto him and said, you know that the princes of the Gentiles exercise dominion over them, and that they that are great exercise authority upon them. But it shall not be so among you, but whosoever will be great among you, let him be your minister, and whosoever will be chief among you, let him be your servant. So it's about being servant-hearted. 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 5 through 9. Who then is Paul, and who is Apollos, but ministers by whom you believed, even as the Lord gave to every man? I have planted, Apollos watered, but God gave the increase. So then neither is he that planteth anything, neither he that watereth, but God that giveth the increase. Now he that planteth, and he that watereth are one, and every man shall receive his own reward according to his own labor, for we are laborers together with God. You're God's husbandry, you're God's building. We're laborers together with God. Mark chapter 9, verses 38 through 40. And John answered him, saying, Master, we saw one casting out devils in thy name, and he followeth us not. And we forbade him, because he followeth not us. But Jesus said, Forbid him not, for there is no man which shall do a miracle in my name that can lightly speak evil of me. And listen to what Jesus said, for he that is not against us is on our part. Sometimes we wish that Jesus had said, whoever is not for us is against us, but he actually said, the one that's not against us is actually for us. And so it takes it even a little further than what sometimes we're willing to go. These scriptures really ought to form a basis. Maybe there's others, but that really ought to form a basis for how we relate to other ministers. Again, Matthew 7:12, basically, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. I want to talk about 3 areas of ministerial relationships. First of all, we'll talk about the pastor-evangelist relation. And so I want to start by talking about the relationship of when you are the evangelist. How, as an evangelist, you should relate with the pastor. And I'm using that term evangelist, I'm using it somewhat loosely. I'm talking about a traveling preacher, talking about a guest minister, talking about someone who is not pastoring. You are in someone else's pulpit. How you relate with the pastor that you are working with, that you are preaching for. And I know that subject in and of itself is probably enough for us to spend a good 45 minutes talking about, and we're not going to take that time. Again, it all begins with attitude, getting your heart right. If your attitude is correct, then all your actions, should follow suit. And so I want to say, number one, honor the pastor. honor the ministry of the pastor, honor the office of the pastor, honor the person of the pastor, and do that not just in lip service. Not just in lip service. I probably don't do a good enough job when I'm a guest minister, and I apologize to the pastors that I went to preach for. I probably don't do a good enough job when I get up in the pulpit, having been invited to come somewhere to preach. I probably don't do enough with my lips publicly in the pulpit, and part of the reason that I feel like I fail at that is because when somebody comes to preach for me, the things that they say, sometimes men get up and they say flattering things about the pastor in whose pulpit they're filling and what have you. Sometimes it's rhetoric. When a person honors you, they don't have to say anything. I mean, when you genuinely honor you, you know that they honor you. It comes out in their preaching. It comes out in the way that they talk to you. It comes out, and so I say that we have to honor that pastor and really honor him, not just with lip service. If it's not done with integrity, if it's just fiction, if they're just words, it's going to be obvious anyway. So we got to start with the heart, get it in our heart to really honor. We honor that man as an individual, as a person. Respecting him as a person, treating him the way we'd like to be treated as a person. We honor his ministry, his labor for the Lord, the church that he serves. We're going to be called upon, numerous times. We're going to go preach Pastor Tim's earlier analogy about successful ministries. We're going to go to some churches and preach where we call this a successful church, and we're going to base it on all kinds of criteria that probably have nothing to do with genuine success. We're going to go to big churches. We're going to go to small churches. We're going to go to churches that are thriving. We're going to go to churches that are struggling. But there is a pastor that is shepherding that flock, and no matter what the circumstances, no matter how we want to measure it, that man is faithful in his and he deserves the recognition, the honor from our heart. This man is doing what God has called him to do in this town, in this community. He's making an impact with these sheep. They're his sheep. And part of honoring him, with the people that we're preaching to, if we're going to help them at all, we're recognizing that there's a man that is laboring on a regular basis with these people. They're his sheep. We're respecting them. We're respecting him and that office. And so honoring. Another thing that I want to say too is serve the church. We're called to minister. Word minister means to serve. Be a servant to the church, and so serve the church in the way in which that you're called upon. We've come to be a blessing. We've come to serve. We've come to leave the church in better shape than we found it. To leave the church better off, to minister, to be a blessing, to be an asset, and not the opposite. A third thing I want to is do the work of an evangelist. That's what Paul told Timothy. Do the work of an evangelist. Now, that doesn't mean travel around preaching the country, with a pop-up camper behind you and preaching revivals here and there. That's not what, the work of an evangelist is to evangelize, to spread the good news. Really, it has to do with preaching to the lost, converting, winning. If you're called upon to evangelize, then do that. Then preach. There have been times in our ministry we've scheduled revivals, and I've been fussed at from some that were full-time evangelists, because I sometimes will invite pastors to come hold me revival. And the truth of the matter is, sometimes you have to get pastors to come to preach to the lost. And too many times evangelists come and they want to straighten out the church. They've come to fix the problems in the church, or they come and they talk about all the problems that are, a lot of churches that I go to, this is what's going on. And my church doesn't need to hear about all the dysfunction in all the places that you go, and they don't need to question in their mind what's he saying about us when he goes to the church I was at last week. So remove that kind of rhetoric from your preaching, and remove that mentality from your heart. Come to be a blessing. My brother talked about the church that he was attending a few years ago, they would typically have guest speakers in, and there was a wide variety of guests that came. But the pastor's brother-in-law came on numerous occasions, sometimes just as a guest minister, and sometimes it was to fill the pulpit when pastor was out of town. He called on his brother-in-law to come, so he came on multiple occasions. But Rob told me that every time this particular evangelist came, he always said, I've come to be a blessing. I've come to edify. And he always did exactly what he said he did. I mean, he came, not to beat up the people, not to leave them bloody, but to speak. I came to speak a word of encouragement, and he did that. And so when you're an evangelist, do that. Do that. Trust the pastor. If he's a pastor and he's got a pastor's heart, and God has put him in that position to lead that church, God will use him to pastor those people. The messages of rebuke and the messages of correction and all these other kinds of things, they will come from the pastor. We got to trust God, that God knows what he's doing, and that God will use him to accomplish that. And then the last thing I want to say is be a courteous guest. And that is, as a guest of the church, as a guest of the church, be sensitive to, every church is not like your church. Don't come in and just make yourself at home. And maybe when the pastor invites you to the pulpit, he may say, come just, take your liberty, make yourself at home. But I'm telling